Good morning, gamers. Good morning, it's me, your planty mommy. Please drink some water, take your meds today. Don't forget, if you forgot, go take it right now. Pause the video. I'll be here when you get back. Today's going to be a long video. I was thinking, what were some videos I wanted to watch that didn't exist when I first became a plant parent? Like something that would just tell me a whole lot in 1 or 2 videos so that I could know stuff. I feel like so much of learning plants on YouTube is just like playing videos in the background for like days and you're not even watching them, you're just listening to them, and then eventually you start to remember the names and you start to remember what the plants look like, and then everything just becomes a lot easier because you're literally eating, sleeping, and breathing houseplants, right? So I'm like, what was a video I wish I had when I was trying to learn everything about houseplants? So today I'm going to be giving you the houseplant beginner's guide to plant genuses. I would say this is more popular, beloved plant genuses. There are a lot of houseplant genuses that are incredibly popular in the houseplant community. As I was writing them down, I just kept coming up with more and more and more. Like I made my initial list and then I was like, wait, I completely forgot like Maranta and Calathea. There's orchids, which literally orchids are a familia. They're not even a genus. There are so many genus of orchids. It's not even funny. I didn't even get to put peace lilies down or aglaonema. So in this video, I'm going to be breaking down some of the most popular houseplant genuses and then giving you examples of popular plants within that genus that you might have seen around or will see around in the future. I feel like this guide will be incredibly beneficial. I'm going to be telling you a teeny bit about each one's care, and I'm also going to be showing you photos of them as we go so that way you can keep up to date. All the photos I am pulling are going to be from different Instagram accounts. I do recommend that you go follow them. There's going to be a fatty list of Instagram accounts in the description box, so go check some of those out if you liked any of these photos. I think that's it. Please don't forget to hit like and subscribe. It helps me to continue making extremely long form content like this on a daily basis, and also you're helping support a small creator for only $5 a month. It's super helpful and I think it's incredibly worth it. In part 1 of this video, we are going to be going over PHILODENDRON, HOYA, MONSTERA, ANTHURIUM, EPIPREMNUM, SCINDAPSUS. Those 6 genuses I'm going to be telling you about, as well as showing you some examples of plants that do exist within the genus, plants that maybe you'll be interested in, or plants that maybe you're not interested in. So without further delay, I'm going to be posting the photos right here in this magical spot. Wow, let's just go ahead and get into it. I would say the #1 most popular houseplant genus by far in general is going to be your philodendron. Philodendron are so popular that most of the time when people are talking about them, they don't even actually say the genus name philodendron. If they say, oh, I got a micans, that means philodendron micans. Oh, if I got a varicosum or melanochrysum, I got a variegated hederaceum, like all those are just philodendron, but you might not know that because people just don't even say philodendron anymore for a lot of philodendron because that's just, they're so commonly known about. Philodendron are typically vining plants. You can have crawlers, they do exist, though they are less common. Vining plants are really great. Philodendron specifically, you can tell the difference between philodendron and another genus, EPIPREMNUM, because philodendron actually keep their little petiole sheaths after the new leaf has come out. You'll still see a really cute, adorable little curly petiole sheath kind of coming off a node. EPIPREMNUM, which I will talk about later, do not keep that. Philodendron also are generally more... Why are you hunting me? Philodendron are generally more smooth, especially when it comes to the stem. Premnum also are they're more rough, they're kind of more coarse, they might even be like, they just look kind of veiny. I know that when I'm showing you these photos of some of these philodendron, you might think, oh, I've seen that at my store, oh, I have that, but you actually might just have an epremnum. They are very similar, especially to people who are newer to plants. That being said, the first philodendron I am going to tell you about is Philodendron hederaceum. This is by far one of the most beloved and most common philodendron in the entire genus. This plant you'll see in doctor's offices, in hospitals, in houses. Sometimes if you live in a more humid environment, you might see them in garden boxes in your local mall or outside. Philodendron in general have pretty easy care in comparison to a lot of the other genuses. They're pretty relaxed. They don't require that much from you. They do like to be watered, I would say more often than not. Philodendron in general do prefer bright indirect light, which basically means you don't want to put your plant in the sun, but you want to put it in the brightest spot in your house that isn't in the sun. Generally, southeast facing windows are incredibly good for philodendron. However, they don't have the strictest light requirement, so you can get away with keeping philodendron in a north facing window or a west facing window. If you are keeping your plants though in a north facing window, it might be wise to get an additional grow light. Along the same lines as hederaceum is the philodendron micans, which is another heart-shaped philodendron. However, this plant is velvet. Yes, velvet plants do exist. Welcome to why everyone loves plants. Some of the most popular plants within the plant community are actually like velvet plants or suede. They have some kind of texture other than just being green and shiny, an iridescent glow that can come off of them. Micans is one of these plants. Depending on what kind of light you're giving it, it might glow a different color. If you put it in the sun, they can sunstress pink. It's very beautiful. Micans are incredibly popular. They are now recently, at least in my area, coming back down in price. Became incredibly popular over the pandemic, so they got more expensive. I'm talking $40 for a 4-inch plant. However, the price in my area is coming back down to about $10 for a 4-inch plant, so that is pretty good. Micans also like bright indirect light. They want to be watered as soon as they kind of start to droop, same as hederaceum. Another plant that you might have heard or will hear about in the future is actually Philodendron melanochrysum. This plant is into the more rare territory. I actually wouldn't call melanochrysum rare anymore, especially because they're also becoming financially really affordable now, a lot more than they used to be. Back in the day though, this plant also was referred to as Philodendron black gold. It's basically a much larger micans. It grows with a much thicker stem, larger leaves. I mean, this plant gets really, really large in its native environments. This plant is very easy to propagate, even though it is more difficult to obtain. So if you wanted to share this one with a friend, you are totally able to. Another philodendron along the lines of melanochrysum is actually going to be varicosum. Varicosum is a very pillowy, velvet, multicolor leaf. Sometimes you'll have them where they're like lime green and red. Other times you have varicosum that are super dark red all around or more iridescent, or there's miniature varicosum. There are a lot of different subspecies and subtypes of varicosum in general. There's pretty much one for every single kind of person out there. Varicosum also like bright indirect light. However, varicosum and melanochrysum both do prefer a more humid environment in general. The final philodendron I'm going to be telling you about is Philodendron pink princess. No doubt you have seen this plant around or heard of it if you have been doing any looking into any plant communities like at all. Pink princess used to be incredibly hard to get. They are a Philodendron erubescens that is variegated. I don't know how it happened. Don't ask me. I just report on it. It just exists. This plant is incredibly popular due to the fact that it has pink leaves. Typically, plants that have any kind of pink on them will be more expensive / considered rare. Plants that have white and pink or red and white on it, like those kinds of combinations will tend to be pretty expensive. Pink princess was extremely expensive for quite a while, but now everyone has them, including some pet stores, big box stores, grocery stores. So they've come down in price quite a considerable amount because of the fact that they are much more widely available, which I personally think is amazing. I think that plants should be accessible. On the exact opposite side of philodendron, plants that are extremely inaccessible remain to be the Philodendron spiritus sancti and the Philodendron ilsamanii, which are arguably the two most popular philodendron for rare collectors or people who collect plants that are ridiculously expensive. I actually do have an ilsamanii I have been growing in for quite a while. It's actually this white thing right here, and I actually did not purchase this. I was lucky enough to trade it. I would say the next most popular genus right now is actually going to be HOYA, followed closely by MONSTERA, which we will discuss next. HOYA are a completely different breed than philodendron. Whereas philodendron are kind of soft and a little bit more delicate, HOYA are pretty rough, pretty sturdy, hard plants. They're considered to be a milkweed. When you break them open, like white milky stuff comes out, almost like when you were to break open like a dandelion or something. And they have these beautiful little button-like flowers that can smell good and sometimes don't smell good. The Burtonii smells so bad. HOYA are incredibly popular right now due to the fact that they used to be very cheap. When the prices of MONSTERA and philodendron went up, the prices of HOYA were still very much down. Therefore, before, people got really into Hoya because they became one of the most affordable choices. Then when the prices of Hoya went up, everyone was already hooked. People kept buying them. People started importing some very rare species from Indonesia and Russia and China. They are now one of the most, if not tied for the most expensive genus to purchase higher end plants of this from out of all the genuses. However, on the lower spectrum of that, you're gonna have your Hoya carnosa slash your Hoya pubicalyx. They are two separate plants, but they are definitely the two most common Hoya that you will run into just like out plant shopping. Hoya carnosa can be green, sometimes it can be speckled with gray, and it has kind of like a very symmetrical oblong leaf that has pretty thick stems, and I personally love them. I have a massive one right here actually. It's very large, it needs to be watered, but it is so beautiful. It's actually about to flower right now, which I'm very excited about. And Hoya pubicalyx has slightly even more oblong, kind of sharper leaves, and it can also be speckled, it can be extremely splashy, and depending on which one you would like, they cost different prices. Then your kind of medium availability for your Hoya carnosas is going to be your Hoya carnosa compacta. There are lots of different varieties. There is Hoya carnosa compacta, which is the green one. Hoya carnosa compacta variegata, which has external variegation. Hoya carnosa compacta monoloa, which has internal variegation. Hoya carnosa compacta Jody's silver, which is a silver variegated one. And there's actually a lot more. So Hoya carnosa compacta in general are more expensive because of the fact that they take so much longer to grow, it's not even funny. I have an extremely big one right here. It's variegated. This is Hoya carnosa compacta variegata. It is massive. And I love it. I have two of these. One of them I grew in myself. This one I actually got when it was already a little bit big, and I've continued to grow it in since then. Hoya carnosa compacta variegata, the externally variegated one, has become a lot more accessible. Hoya monoloa with the internal variegation is still a little, it's still quite expensive, and Jody's silver is incredibly expensive. We're talking multiple hundreds of dollars for one. By one, I mean like one cutting of one tendril. And they grow so slow, so you'll have a full plant in like 30 years. Another plant you might see around a lot is actually gonna be your Hoya bella. This is a really adorable kind of spear-shaped leafed plant. It has very long green vines that actually aren't woody like most of the other Hoya vines. And they have these little kind of arrow tip pointed leaves that grow off of each side of the leaf. They have adorable flowers. It's extremely popular because it flowers a lot. Hoya bella flowers like all of the time. Like you'll literally look at it and it's flowering. So another Hoya you might actually find around at your local big box store. Big box stores, when people talk about them in the plant community, refer to a Lowe's, Home Depot, or maybe a local big box store that you actually have in your area. One that you might find around quite a lot is going to be actually your Hoya species affinity Burtonii. It used to be called Hoya bilobata because it was actually mislabeled by the company that was producing them. However, it is Hoya species affinity Burtonii. Affinity means that this is a separate Hoya species that looks like Burtonii but is actually not Burtonii, and so instead it is an undescribed species that has an affinity of looking a lot like Burtonii. This plant is really beautiful. It also is known for flowering all of the time. The flowers are very pretty. However, they smell terrible. I think they smell just awful, so I do cut these ones off. Lacunosa flowers is another Hoya variety. Here is mine. My Hoya lacunosa flowers genuinely all of the time. I know it looks sad, but I promise it's actually not. Here is, it just finished flowering right there. We have another, it's making some more flowers right here. This one literally is never not flowering for me, so Hoya lacunosa is a great option for Hoyas if you love really teeny tiny little Hoyas that smell like lavender when they flower. I personally love Hoya lacunosa. Then on the flip side of that, you actually have your Hoya Mathilde, which is another very popular Hoya. It has little circular leaves. And then there's Hoya serpens, which actually has very teeny tiny little leaves, and you might actually mistake it for a Mathilde if you didn't really know what you were looking for. Now on the high end of Hoyas right now, you actually have your Hoya clemensorium, which I would say is one of the most popular high-end expensive Hoya for people to own right right now. This plant is extremely veiny. It is like purple and green and sometimes red, and it has frayed tips, and it's like frilled and rough and sometimes speckled. It's a very cool looking plant. It looks like it's from the dinosaur age. It's very popular. All right, now we're gonna move into the Monstera category. Monstera are by far one of the most popular genuses. I would say that they used to be the second most popular genus next to Philodendron. However, Hoya are they're so popular right now. It is just not even funny. Examples of Monstera that you might find are Monstera deliciosa. This is one of the most popular varieties of Monstera. I have so many of them. I have an entire wall of just absolutely massive Monstera deliciosa because I adore them. I think that they are some of the best plants to ever exist. I actually do not own any variegated Monstera. I have a tiny spore variegated node of one that is variegated that I actually found. I ended up selling most of the plant because it was just in the way, and I honestly wasn't loving it anymore. I took a tiny node from it, literally a leafless node, and I've been growing it in for a while, and it has been a fun little experiment. But yeah, I don't own a Monstera albo or a Thai constellation or anything like that actually, because I don't know, the green one just does it for me, man. It is so good. Now, you might not know what a Monstera albo is. Monstera albo is actually going to be one of these plants that has a variegated white patch on it. Variegation, if you did not know, is when a plant has a different color that is a mutation on it. Sometimes, though, they're not mutations. There's multiple different kinds of variegation. For example, there's pattern gene variegation, which is a type of variegation you'll see on spider plants or begonias. It's a constant pattern that shows up across all leaves. There's silver variegation, which is actually called blister variegation, and it's because underneath the plant's epidermis there is some air trapped, and our eyes perceive that trapped air underneath the leaf as silver, which is so cool. Then you have your chimeric variegation, which is like a naturally occurring, most of the time beautiful type of variegation on plants, and that's what Monstera albos and aureas are. There are a couple other types of variegation, but those are the most like common ones that you'll see is pattern gene, blister variegation, and chimeric variegation. There is a type of variegation called transposon variegation that I have made a video or two about, and it is a permanent, non-chimeric version of variegation that looks chimeric. However, it is actually permanent. That is actually what I believe the Ilsamanii to have, for any of you guys who know about it. Just because the Ilsamanii don't ever revert. Even if you get a plant with a couple green leaves, it will always come back. It is not referred to as the variegated Ilsamanii, it's referred to as the Ilsamanii because it is just naturally variegated. I do believe Ilsamanii has transposon variegation and not chimeric like other plants. So there you go. If you know about stuff, now you know some more stuff. Your Monstera albo, like I said, will be one of these that has white variegation on it. There's also the Monstera aurea, the Monstera mint. There's spore variegated Monsteras. One specific sport you might see around a lot is Thrasher sport, which was made by Mr. Thrasher, who is an incredibly popular Instagram creator who kind of popularized Monstera sport hunting. I think his name is Tyler Thrasher. He has a very cool sport variegated Monstera that a lot of people have kind of fallen in love with. So the next plant we're going to talk about is the Monstera adansonii. This is a smaller version of Monstera. You might actually see people call this the Swiss cheese plant. I don't know why. I think it's just because of the little holes in it. This plant is called Monstera adansonii. There is narrow form, regular form, and round form. There's also variegated varieties of this plant. There is Monstera adansonii aurea, there's albo, there's mint, there's archipelago, there's Indomint. There are many, many different varieties of the variegated adansonii. We're also now starting to see some like Lechleriana adansonii that are variegated. I don't know, it's just cool. There's a lot of different varieties of this one that's variegated if you're interested in that. A plant though that is not adansonii and is quite a bit more expensive is your Monstera obliqua. Some people also call it obliqua. There are a lot of Monstera obliqua. Something that you might hear people say around is it's never obliqua, it's not obliqua, and that is not true. There was a time at which it was true, and it is not true anymore. You can get Monstera obliqua now for literally like less than $100 in some cases, and you can get a massive plant of it for less than $200 or $300 now. It is very common in collection. I will say it is not rare in collection. There are people who are still trying to hype this plant up to keep it expensive because they want to make money, and there is no shame on them. However, you cannot call something rare when literally like so many people have them now in comparison to how it used to be. There used to be only a couple handfuls of people who actually had it. Now a lot of people have it. Every single collector I know has one. If you get an obliqua and someone's like, that's not a real obliqua, that's just an Addisonii, be like, no, you're wrong. Like this plant is not rare anymore. It is absolutely not rare in collection anymore at all. Back in the day, it used to be $1,000 or more for just an unleafed node of this plant because it was so hard to obtain. Now it is absolutely not that expensive. When I bought mine, it was a node and a leaf, and I bought it for $500. I think 2 years ago. It's very cute. I love it. The next plant I'm including in the Monstera section is not a Monstera. I need you to hear me say this. This plant is not a Monstera. I am, however, including it in this little section because its common name refers to it as a Monstera, and we are of course talking about Rhaphidophora tetrasperma. Rhaphidophora is its entire own genus. It consists of plants like Rhaphidophora tetrasperma, Rhaphidophora decursiva, Rhaphidophora, I think like Cryptantha. There's so many Rhaphidophoras. Other people also say Rhaphidophora, you know, like there's lots of ways to say it. Rhaphidophora tetrasperma is very specifically known as being the mini Monstera because it looks kind of like this without actually looking like this. It's also very small in comparison. Rhaphidophora tetrasperma actually has tissue culture varieties and non-tissue culture varieties. In the plant community that you're now getting into, you might have noticed that sometimes people say that they're looking for a plant, but they don't want the TC version of that. That means that they are referring specifically to tissue culture. Tissue culture is when you take a plant and you make a bunch of plants from one teeny tiny cell, and then you like mass produce these plants. Tissue cultured plants look different from the plants that they were TC'd off of until they mature and can turn into the actual plant. They have different growth patterns as they get to that level. Tetrasperma that are tissue cultured tend to be more pointy, they are longer, they almost look like EPIPREMNUM, which again we're gonna get to later. You say, why can't we play? You work, why can't we play? You'll see this plant often referred to as Monstera minima or mini Monstera or Monstera ginny. This plant is not a Monstera, but I felt like since this video is for beginners, if you see that, you'll know now. Ashley told me that's actually Rhaphidophora or Rhaphidophora, however you want to say it, and it's Rhaphidophora tetrasperma. We're going to move on now to the next category, which is actually going to be Anthurium. Anthurium are another very popular variety of plant. Normally you'll see this one around. You'll see it around grocery stores, doctor's offices, maybe your aunt's house or your grandma's house, or if you live in a humid place, maybe you see it. That's my anklet, you can't play with that. However, houseplant collectors don't tend to collect that specific type of Anthurium. Instead, you will see them collecting an Anthurium maybe you've heard around that is actually called Clarinervium. This used to be like the beginner Anthurium. It's incredibly easy to take care of. It doesn't have the same humidity requirement as a lot of other Anthurium. It can deal with a lot lower levels of humidity and still grow extremely well. This plant, I would say, had its heyday 4 to 3 years ago. It was incredibly expensive, however, it was very popular. It was like the it Anthurium, and it was, in my opinion, a gateway Anthurium. Another gateway Anthurium was the crystallinum and Anthurium forgetii. Forgetii is a very cool Anthurium. Actually, it does not have a lobed sinus. The heart leaf shape that you see in a lot of plants is because at the top of the leaf there are lobes that meet together at the sinus. The leaf sinus is actually where the petiole connects to the leaf and the stem. So your stem is down here, then you have your petiole, and then your leaf hangs off the petiole. Most plants have lobed petiole sinuses. Specific Anthurium does not. It's actually just a perfectly round kind of leaf with a point at the end. Very beautiful, and because of the fact that it's round, people they obsess over it. They also love that it's called Forgetii. It's a pretty cool name, to be honest. The reason people take to certain plants, it can have anything to do with the plant's name specifically, or its growth pattern, or just how it looks. Anthurium, however, are extremely difficult to propagate in comparison to philodendron and every other plant that we've actually talked about so far. So you might not see that many people collect Anthurium because of the fact that they cannot make a return on their investment that easily. When you see people buy philodendron, it's very common in the plant community for someone to buy a $1,000 philodendron that's very large. They'll then cut it up into smaller pieces, sell each individual piece for a little bit over what they probably should. Again, there's nothing wrong with that. It's just how you make your money back. And then they make their money back by keeping only one cutting of that plant and selling the rest of it to make back either the same amount or more money than they originally paid for the plant in general. That is an incredibly popular thing to do with Monstera philodendron. People do it with Hoya, although Hoya are slower growers, so it's a little bit more difficult to convince people to buy unrooted Hoya. Because of this, you might only find people who have a decent amount of expendable income collecting Anthurium. I've definitely found that they're more of a bougie plant to collect, just because of the fact that they are very expensive. I think out of all the other plants, the genuses, they've kind of come down in prices and then gone up and then come down. Anthurium have pretty much always stayed the same price, except for the clarinervium and I would say the crystallinum are both, because those two were very popular. A lot of people have been growing them, which means that there's a lot more, which means that they're cheaper. However, most Anthurium are still just as expensive as they were 5 to 6 to 7 years ago. Anthurium are just a more collector type of plant. You can't quite share them as easily. They grow slower. They have much higher humidity requirement in general in comparison to Monstera philodendron and Hoya. There's nothing wrong with them, and if you see someone who has one, don't just be like, oh, you have money, huh? Because that's not always how it is. I have quite a few Anthurium and I've only paid for one of them. All the rest of them were trades that I just did for fun with friends. Yeah, they're just fun, they're pretty. Most of them are velvet, they're shiny, they're iridescent. A lot of them, when their leaves come in, unlike philodendron where leaves come out almost the exact same size it's gonna stay, Anthurium leaves actually come in microscopic and then they literally just expand. I don't even know how it happens, it just does. It's so cool to watch. Some higher levels of Anthurium might include your Anthurium poppy or Papillilaminum, I think. Papillilaminum? People call it poppy, Anthurium poppy. A pure poppy that is not a hybrid is extremely expensive. Last year, I purchased one that was a seedling, a tiny seedling for $400 because I was irresponsible. But it's okay, I still have it. It is big now. I'm actually about to trade. It made a pup, so I'm actually about to trade my friend Devin for a variegated alocasia fried. So if you know what that is, it's very cool. I'm very excited. The poppy, because of the fact that it is so widely used in hybrids, to find a true pure poppy is very hard because most of the time poppies make seeds pretty easily in general. However, because of that, it's very easy for hybrids to just make seeds and then for people to sell those hybrids as normal poppy, and then people grow them in and they're like, wait, this is not a pure poppy. You can tell the difference between a pure poppy and a not pure poppy if you know what to look for. Sorry, there was a spider. Another type of Anthurium might be your, people call them pendant Anthuriums or belt Anthuriums, and those are going to be your Anthurium wendlingeri or Anthurium pallidiflorum. I actually have one behind me in here. This is my IKEA greenhouse cabinet. I've made a video on this if you're curious. This is my Anthurium pallidiflorum. It is a longer hanging type of Anthurium that, in my opinion, is so good. It is absolutely amazing. I love them. If you give them enough humidity, they actually get extremely massive. People like the wendlingeri because it looks like pallidiflorum, except for the fact that it actually has a corkscrew inflorescence. So it's just a very unusual trait for a plant to have. A very popular, more expensive, not quite pendant Anthurium, but very similar to one is going to be your Anthurium warocqueanum or your queen Anthurium. This plant took over the houseplant community, gosh, 3 or 4 years ago. It just became so popular. Everyone needed to have one. People still love them. Actually, one of my members has like 20 of them just in their collection because they're just obsessed with them. It's very cool to see them all lined up next to each other. Warocqueanum are incredibly beautiful, incredibly cool. They're shiny. They have this beautiful dark green complexion with this silvery blister variegation along their leaf veins. It's very nice. This plant, however, is a very difficult Anthurium to take care of. I will say it's harder than the pallidiflorum and the other Anthurium I've listed so far, including poppy. It's just so picky, and I don't know why, it just is. And finally, the last Anthurium I'm going to be telling you about is a more unusual Anthurium called Anthurium species limon. This is a climbing Anthurium, which is not common. Most Anthurium are one a dude. They're a dude with a bunch of little nodes that are very closely like stacked together, like there's a node here, and then there's a node here, and then there's one here, and that's why they're so hard to propagate. However, Anthurium species limon, it is a vining Anthurium that is very easy to propagate because you just have to cut it, and then you can have another one. So it's very cool, very beautiful. I would love to have one someday. I have the perfect environment for it. I have this IKEA greenhouse cabinet I built myself, as well as a Millsbo greenhouse cabinet that I grow all of my hard to find, expensive, high humidity plants in them. Now we're gonna talk about the EPIPREMNUM category. You might not have heard of EPIPREMNUM, but you have definitely heard of golden pothos or Pothos aurum. Pothos, I'm gonna say this loud and clear. Pothos is a houseplant genus. It is, however, not the genus that you think it is. Pothos is a genus of incredibly small, very, very high humidity rainforests, cloud forests, growing plants, vining, shingling, very small plants. Within that genus is one called Pothos barbarianus, not this. This is EPIPREMNUM. EPIPREMNUM has been co-opted to be called Pothos. Why? I have made a video called The History of Houseplants, the entire history of houseplant collecting, I guess. And in it, we learn that there was a guy who saw a botanist who back in like the 1700s saw a green vining plant and just called it a pothos. So every green vining plant was just called pothos, and for some reason, golden pothos was never able to shake the pothos name. It is, however, not a pothos, and I will not be referring to it ever again in this video as a pothos. It is an EPIPREMNUM. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. The most common types of EPIPREMNUM that you're gonna see are, again, the Premnum aurum, or the golden pothos. This plant you'll see like everywhere. You'll see it in malls, you'll see it in outdoor plant boxes, you'll see it in your doctor's office, in your friend's house, your grandma's house. It is everywhere. It's an extremely beloved plant within the houseplant community. Very easy to grow. It is very easy to take care of. You can give it even lower light conditions and it will still thrive. You don't have to water it that much. They're just like, they just thrive. Another one you might have heard about is your EPIPREMNUM marble queen. This is a more white variegated EPIPREMNUM. It is, however, not expensive. Most white variegated plants that you'll see are extremely expensive, and this one is not. This one is very cheap, $5 to $10 in fact for a 4-inch to 6-inch plant. Maybe you'll see a $20 to $30 plant that's like an 8-inch to a 10-inch round that's very large and hanging down. So they're very, very popular. Another one that is extremely popular, I think less so now than it was, is your EPIPREMNUM pinnatum Cebu Blue. This is a green EPIPREMNUM that has a blue sheen on the top of it. So when you look at it, it doesn't look like a normal green plant. It almost looks blue or gray. They're very beautiful. Most people get them at big box stores. That's just the best way to honestly get a hold of them still. Even when I see houseplant shops sell them, they sell them for so expensive versus get one at your Lowe's for like 15 bucks if your Lowe's has one. On the higher end of things, you'll have your EPIPREMNUM pinnatum albo or Aurea variegata. As following the trend, these are two plants that are your normal green EPIPREMNUM pinnatum that either have white or yellow variegation on them. This plant used to be very expensive and hard to obtain. It is now incredibly easy and cheap to get a hold of. If you would like an EPIPREMNUM pinnatum albo or Aurea, now is the time. And finally, your higher tier of this EPIPREMNUM plant genus, it's going to be your EPIPREMNUM pinnatum Indo Mint or Indo Marble. This is a type of EPIPREMNUM that actually fenestrates extremely small. Most EPIPREMNUM, you have to get very big for them to fenestrate. However, this one fenestrates when the leaves are, I mean, even only this big. It's a very beautiful white, mostly white with some green, variegated EPIPREMNUM that comes from Indonesia. Some of them are minty looking, some of them are marbled looking, and it's referred to as the Indo variety. You might hear people say, oh, this is the Indo version. That means that it's an import from Indonesia, or they might say it's the Ecuador version, which is, you know, from Ecuador. There's lots of different types and varieties that are imported from specific places because of the way that the plants just grow there are different. So yeah, that's EPIPREMNUM. Final one we're going to talk about in this video is our SCINDAPSUS. Before we get into SCINDAPSUS though, please like the video if you haven't yet. And also, I have a lot got more plant genuses that we are going to talk about, but I'm going to be breaking this video into multiple different parts because I've been filming for an hour now and we've only gone over 5 genuses, and there's like 20 genuses on my list to go over. So there will be multiple parts. SCINDAPSUS is the last one that we're going to talk about in this video. SCINDAPSUS or SCINDAPSUS is a type of vining plant similar to philodendron, vining philodendron, or vining EPIPREMNUM that you'll see sold in a lot of big box stores or houseplant shops, or maybe even your grocery store. One of the most popular ones that you'll see is SCINDAPSUS argyreus, which is a green with some reflective blister variegation on it and kind of a very interesting little pattern. Another very common one that you'll see that's more expensive just because it's beautiful is your SCINDAPSUS exotica. There is SCINDAPSUS silver lady. There's SCINDAPSUS silvery Ann, which is really cool because that one actually has an unpredictable pattern on it. All the other SCINDAPSUS for the most part are pattern gene, but for some reason the silvery Ann just like all the leaves have a different pattern on them, which is pretty cool. Those SCINDAPSUS I would say are the most common and popular ones to own for the lower level SCINDAPSUS. However, there are a lot of SCINDAPSUS. Another one that you might find is the Trubii moonlight or Trubii dark form. There's a SCINDAPSUS Trubii that is very black and a SCINDAPSUS Trubii that's kind of almost a cebu blue in tone. It's kind of gray and it has some darker green around it in certain areas, but it almost looks like someone just painted some gray on top of the green that was already there. There's also a matte green SCINDAPSUS called SCINDAPSUS Jade. It's very cool. There's also special varieties like SCINDAPSUS Haask, I think AASK. This is a SCINDAPSUS that just hit the market this year. Everyone is just obsessed with it. It's a SCINDAPSUS that is green with almost more like a dark green with emerald green blister variegation. So instead of it being silver, it's like green on green, but it's like shiny green, and everyone is losing their mind. It's a shingling SCINDAPSUS instead of being a vining SCINDAPSUS. If you don't know what the difference is, it definitely prefers to climb, and if it's not climbing, it's not really gonna grow right. And then there are variegated varieties of SCINDAPSUS. So there are variegated exoticas, variegated Trubii, variegated jades, variegated everything. Like, variegated plants bring in a lot of money, and so people are always trying to make variegated varieties of houseplants that already exist. See the variegated Spirit of Sancti, which just became a thing this year. They're selling for $20,000 a piece. SCINDAPSUS in general have care pretty similar to philodendron. They thrive in humidity. They will also thrive in lower humidity situations, given that they have enough light. SCINDAPSUS also very notably curl up around the sides when they start to get thirsty. So instead of just drooping, the leaves will actually start to like curl inwards when they want water. So that'll be something to watch for. So yeah, that is my beginner's guide to some of the most popular houseplant genuses for new houseplant parents. If you have any questions at all, I will do my best to respond to them in the comments section. Share this video to your friends. If you have new plant friends, you can post it in Facebook groups. That would help me out a ton. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe because this is my full-time job and you are helping support someone do their dream, even though they are a smaller creator. If you want to support me extra, you can join the YouTube channel memberships, which supports me continue to make this content full-time. It's only $5 a month. It's cheaper than your coffee and it is extremely helpful. Let me know which of these you think is your favorite if you're a new plant parent watching this. If this was helpful for you, if there were more questions you can have, so as I go forward making more of these videos, I can try to cover things that I didn't quite cover. I didn't want to focus so much on care. I mostly wanted to focus on different plants that exist that you might see around. You might want to use this video to study what they are, because for some reason we just like to do that. I don't know. When I got into plants, I was like, I need to know what all the plants are. And so I would try to watch videos, but there was no videos that would just tell me what plants were and what their names were and like what their genuses were and, you know, all this stuff. So I hope that this helps. But yeah, that's gonna be it for me today. So thank you so much for watching this video. Like I said, please don't forget to hit like and subscribe. Share this video with your friends. And yeah, that'll be it. Thank you so much to Botanica's, Kim Klanowski, and Lauren Alexandra for the extra and continued channel support. And yeah, let me know what other genuses you guys want to see me cover in the comment section down below, and I will just see you in the next genus section. Don't forget to take your meds!